I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I am audio only for just a second. If you will bear with me, I will fix something. I have never done that before. Never done. That's a first. All right. You witnessed a live first. My camera was completely off. You'd think I would notice that. My other camera's on. So we're here. Okay. This week has been tough for a lot of people. That shooting up at the Covenant School in Nashville it disturbs me, and I know it bothers a lot of people. And you know, it's always horrible when you have a school shooting, especially because these are children. But you know, the murders in this country, it's disheartening at times, very hard to deal with. And when you see good, godly people being murdered, it hurts. I mean, I don't even know them. And it hurts my heart. You know, and I know a lot of you feel the same way. What do we do with that? Well, today's guest has lived through a very similar hurt, a very somewhat similar situation. And so I think the timing on this is providential, because we need to know how to approach this, how to look at this, how to find, as the title says, some purpose in the pain. And it's a hard one. So this will be a hard conversation today, but I think it will point us in the right direction. I know, because David Blackburn has actually been on the broadcast program, so this is my second interview with him, and I was just watching that program. It airs in a couple of weeks, but you get a little advance peek at Davey here on the live broadcast. So we appreciate you being here, Judy. Hope you're feeling well today. Anybody watching live, feel free to jump in the conversation. I know it is a hard one. Davey, great to have you on Live Today Live. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. It's great to be with you guys.
Before we get into the details of what you've been through, the loss and the pain, I can't help but wonder, because if I had something this difficult, and I almost don't like the word tragedy. It was tragic, yes, but it was criminal, which to me is a whole additional layer. Yeah. How do you talk about this? I would want to bury it and never, just maybe honor it, but not. I wouldn't want to talk about it that much. How do you do that?
Right. Well, you're right. I think that would be everybody's inclination. That was mine. My temptation was to just not talk about it. It's a lot. I don't want to say it would be easier to not talk about it, but it would feel safer. It wouldn't hurt as bad initially. But there were a couple things that at the beginning of losing my wife, I was forced to talk about it. And so I don't know if I even had that choice, but now looking back on it, I'm glad that I was forced to talk about it. I was a pastor, so I was preaching every single week leading up to losing Amanda. And then I kind of got back in the pulpit 2 months later, so to speak. Now that seems like a very quick time to get back in the pulpit. But for me, it felt like I was almost taking back territory that the enemy had stolen from me in the spiritual. And so preaching every week to my congregation, who was also hurting because of the loss of Amanda, it gave me a platform and an opportunity to process through what I was going through. And the more that I talked about it, for some reason it healed me. And the more that I saw how other people were being healed by talking about it and giving them permission to unpack their own pain, it began to bring some purpose and some meaning. Now, there's in something as heinous and as tragic as losing a loved one, especially in this way, there is no explanation for it, right? So often we're looking to God to give us some explanation for why this has happened in our life, or why is there pain and trauma. This is the theodicy question. Why, if God is a loving God, why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? And we go down that trail. I think it's important to ask questions, church oftentimes has told us we shouldn't question God. No, I think we should question God. I think we should take our questions to God. The alternative would be to tuck our questions in a back pocket and run away from God. So God can handle our tough questions, but he doesn't give us explanation often. What he does do, though, is he gives us something even richer, and that's incarnation. He walks with us in our pain.
Okay. Well, we're going to unpack a lot of those points, but let's back up and fill in the blanks. Tell us what happened.
So in 2015, I was a pastor and church planter with my wife, Amanda, and our 15-month-old son, Weston, and we were pregnant with our second. And a Tuesday morning, it was November 10th, 2015, I left for the gym early on a Tuesday morning, normal Tuesday morning, and I came back and walked into my worst nightmare. My wife was on our living room floor, surrounded by blood. She was unconscious, but she was breathing very laboriously. When we finally got her to the hospital, after the EMT had been to our house and detectives and then the doctors had been able to inspect her, we found that she had 3 bullet wounds, and their suspicion was that our home had been broken into. Later, that was confirmed as the investigators apprehended the 3 men who broke into our home, and she was caught up in the scuffle. Many of us assume, and even the prosecution assumes, that she was trying to protect our 15-month-old who was in his crib, untouched and unharmed the whole time. But we lost Amanda and lost our unborn baby.
The evil in that is breathtaking. I mean, I don't know where you go from there. Walk us through some of those early days, because especially, and I don't presume that anyone who lost a loved one in Nashville is watching, but people who have lost loved ones, just in general, but specifically to a crime, I mean, they're going to relate. How do you walk out of that darkness? Because that's dark.
For me, and I can't assume or presume anybody else's experience, but for my experience, it was shock initially. That's it. You're just absolutely numb, and you cannot believe anything like this has happened. And for the next 2 weeks before they arrested the men, I had no face to put this crime to. So I was just overwhelmed by a very deep, dark sadness and shock. Now, I was also on national television on a few outlets, mainly because we had a wonderful church that surrounded us at that time, a very large church in South Carolina that essentially kind of sent a team up to help me. They were the church that launched us as a church plant, and they helped to shield some of the media firestorm that was. And one of the pieces of advice I got from them was, how would Amanda want this to be played out? Would they want the media to focus on the crime or focus on Jesus and her life and legacy and what she lived for? And so I felt like I needed to try to drive some of that so that the media would hear the gospel, and that the world would hear the gospel. Because any one of these kinds of circumstances, these are opportunities for us to really peer in and ask some of those really difficult questions, and also to see the gospel. So the first 2 weeks, it's shock, trying to figure out this media firestorm. That's not common to most people's story, is having to figure all of that out. But then after the first 2 weeks, as everything kind of subsided, people started to go back to their life. The funeral was over. Most people describe that this is the case too. I entered into a really deep, dark depression. Some of it was instigated by seeing the men that they arrested. And there was a hatred and a rage that began to fuel inside of me that I did not understand. I'd never experienced anything remotely close to that. And so I became physically sick, which often grief will do that. But grief coupled with rage and anger toward a perpetrator can exacerbate that quite a bit. So for the next probably month, I was physically sick, and I didn't understand why. I thought I had the right quote unquote theology to approach this as a pastor, but as far as like the practice of really being able to sort through the loss of your best friend and your soulmate and your child to be, that just completely took me out.
Well, I want to ask, because of the justice there, we believe God's a just God. We believe